So hello, welcome everybody. My name is Mindel van Gijzel and I'm working at Microcentrum. I'm normally manager high-tech platform. This webinar would have been hosted by Karen Maus, my colleague, but unfortunately she couldn't be there today. So Karen Maus hosts all the model-based definition webinars. They are every second Wednesday of the month. And today we have the second webinar. And before we are going to start, I want to ask you to raise your hand digitally if you can hear and see me correctly, because that's pretty nice if you can hear us today and see what we're having in plan for you. So if you want to raise your hand digitally, that would be very nice. And then another thing, if you have questions today, you can answer them or you can ask them via the Q&A and we will answer them after all the presentations. And then my part is up and I want to ask Hans Derks to take the stage from me. And Hans Derks is working at HiQA. Hans, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mil. Okay, good afternoon to you guys and women out there. Welcome to our webinar, 6 ways to improve your quality manufacturing supply chain process. My name is Hans Derks and I'm responsible for the HiQA business in Europe. And I'd like to introduce to you today's presenters. We have Sam Golan. He is the CEO and founder of HiQA, and Chris Mendicino. Chris is VP of Product at HiQA. Let's look at the agenda for this webinar. First, Sam will talk about the pains buyers and suppliers are facing throughout the whole supply chain in sharing manufacturing quality requirements. Next, Chris will go over the flow of data in that supply chain. He will simulate a real buyer-supplier scenario and will do a live demonstration of how to use the manufacturing quality management system during that process. At the end, as Mendel said, we will have time for answering your questions live. And I would like to give the presentation to Sam Golan. Sam, please share your screen and don't forget to unmute yourself so we can all hear your presentation. Sam, to you.
Sam, I think your microphone is still muted. Yep.
I think we are okay now.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So thank you, Hans, and thank you everybody participating today to our webinar, 6 ways to improve your manufacturing quality supply chain process. The question is, why do we need to improve supply chain process? It is working for many, many years. Well, not really. The complexity of today's supply chain with the global market environment introduces new business needs that are far more demanding than what present solution can provide today. Currently, the solution available at the OEM or buyer levels suffer from lack of capabilities, or actually the software solution lack of capabilities. That focus now on those solutions mainly on metadata rather than real manufacturing and quality requirements, which is the most critical part communicating with supply chain. And this is associated with cost, quality, and delivery time, this missing critical data. So why thousands buyers and OEM engineers are visiting suppliers daily? Is it because supplier issue? It is because of OEM issues, or it is actually both? So here is a quote from well-known publication called Supply Chain 27 about the metadata, which is actually ERP. Because when we talk about supply chain today, ERP considers a supply chain manager. 75% of the available supply chain data actually originated out of the ERP system. Does that make sense? Not probably. So what does it mean? We say kind of they get it incorrect or incomplete data when it comes from ERP system. Because it's the metadata. And because of its metadata, it means that human interpretation become one of the most critical negative impact on parts manufacturing by suppliers in many aspects. As mentioned, it's delivery time, it's cost, and of course, it is quality. So if we are looking a little bit into the interpretation by people, and this is a quote from Bill Tendler. He's a founder and president of Multimetrics, well-known GD&T company in quality side. Interpretation by people on a unique, exclusive data may impact wrong outcome from what the data originated or planned to have the results. Practically, we are talking about buyer or OEM providing us unique data, which is in most cases on 2D print or 3D model with GD&T or PMI, if you will. And this language, said Bill Tendler, supposed to be converted to action without interpretation, describing in details how part needs to be made without any issues out of it. But you really know what are the issues, right? So if we are looking into a supply chain, what actually happened from the OEM side all the way to the manufacturing. And here you see a kind of layer of OEM on the left side and tier 4 on the right side. And actually the, I will call it the chart, the red chart, talking about the cost that is extrapolated in the supply chain as you go down in tiers. So when the OEM finishing designing his part and creating his TDP, the technical data package in some languages or terminology, and he outsourced this part to the tier 1. Tier 1, of course, having his own issues, and then it's going to be outsourced to tier 2, and tier 2 to tier 3, and then it goes to tier 4. And then look into this some process that everybody knows what it is, of course, but then you look into this manufacturing facility that is located somewhere, either across the street or remotely out of the country. And this is not actually getting to the idea of the distance in mileage, how far is the shop. It's also the difference in language, difference in manufacturing culture, in quality culture. And actually, you probably know that OEM in many cases does not know even where the part is actually made or by whom. And if we are looking into the communication, and you remember that when we were kids, this is the way we talk to each other. Actually, that's the distance between OEM and tier 3, 4 in manufacturing. It's a Babylon syndrome. It will be, I think, quickly enough to read a couple of those sentences as you see here, which we call it the supply chain fiasco, okay? So in just reading these few quotes on this slide, we can learn about the challenges of the Dreamliner supply chain. Almost 4 years delays, and what they say here in the second quote, plethora of parts problem coming in and require fix. And the list is much, much longer. Currently, the manufacturing supply chain with any given industry are missing crucial capabilities, but mainly suffer from the supply chain interpretation syndrome. Getting quality requirement either on a 2D print or 3D files or 3D model, kind of immediate stretching the point of, hey, we need to interpret what it is. And if you look what happened in 80+% of the manufacturing industry, people are still bubbling print by hand or getting 3D model with missing information or limited information or just critical information. And now they need to interpret what needs to be done because the engineer who made the 3D model not really know how this part going to be made, how many operation, what is the quality strategy. This is something that the supplier at the end needs to do. And think about it, then it goes from tier 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And somebody somewhere in maybe basement or somewhere needs to guess what needs to be done. So the good news, manufacturing is growing very, very fast. If we are looking into the automotive industry, the single standard car made by 40,000 parts, and it is growing to 60,000 parts when we talk about electric to hybrid. And now we're talking about autonomous car, then it goes to 80,000 parts. In comparison, when we talk about the aerospace industry, the Boeing 737 has about 1 million parts, and it goes higher with newer and larger model. And the 747-8 series has 6 million parts. And we can go on and on. Cell phone is built every 20 seconds, and we replace phone every 2-3 years. So this industry is growing and growing and growing. And we can add much more data in all those vertical manufacturing industry. But the good news, it's growing despite of the COVID-19. But someone needs to make them every day, and it takes a lot of effort, and the requirement is growing. The quality requirement is growing. As I mentioned, parts are getting smaller, tighter tolerances, and quality communication with suppliers and quality tools that are used by manufacturing company are still 50 years behind. So if you look into what happened in our life, manufacturing facilities are always pressed by OEM or buyers, if you will, in cost reduction, expedite delivery time, providing much, tight tolerance product, variety of product on time and on budget. And if we will summarize, and I mentioned at the beginning about ERP is a need, but not as a solution for supply chain. PO's perfect. Warehouse managing, perfect. But supply chain, really data, I'm not sure that it's really providing the solution. Manufacturing supply chain having many, many moving parts and having tons of challenges every day. So only scalable, interoperable supply chain planning will optimize the process from A to Z, eliminating the needs of interpretation, and actually streamline the process between suppliers, buyers, and all in between. So I would like just quickly to summarize and talk to you 1 minute about HiQA. HiQA is a quality management system, enables company at any size, small to enterprises, to automate their internal manufacturing quality processes, also with supply chain management. The company has hundreds of customers already from all sizes, from OEM all the way to the smallest tier in the aerospace industry, medical, oil and gas, defense, automotive, and all others manufacturing verticals. The key success factor of HiQA is this is all-in-one product. If you look into your current quality processes, you will find out that to do a quality project from A to Z, you're probably using 3, 4, 5, 7 packages or solution, a lot of Excel. And then if you can start your project from A to Z, like from 2D, 3D file, all the way, sorry, to reporting, And all of this can be sit on our HiQA 360, which is the supply chain. Then there is a completely seamless integration between OEM buyers all the way to the suppliers. And actually with that, I would like to say thank you again for taking the time, and I will transfer my presentation rights to Hans. Hans, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam, and thank you for your presentation. I think we learned a lot about the issues that buyers and suppliers in the supply chain are facing. We will get back to you during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And to all viewers, remember to post your questions in the Q&A section you can find on the bottom of your screen. Next on the agenda is Chris, and Chris will be presenting and demonstrate the solution that Sam mentioned, HiQA 360, and he will do that in a combined presentation and live demonstration partition of this webinar. So Chris, you already have the presentation rights, I guess. So unmute yourself and start your part of the presentation, please.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Sam. Good introduction. So my name is Chris Mendocino with HiQA, and I just wanted to take you through practically what this looks like, the solution that we're bringing to the market and solving all those challenges that were mentioned by Sam. So just a quick overview of what we're going to step through here. We have, well, I just want to talk about big picture, what the flow looks like between a customer and a supplier, or buyer and supplier. Then we'll demonstrate a live demo of what the customer side experience looks like. And then we'll talk about the supplier side experience through a combination of some demoing, but there's a lot of activity that would happen on the supplier side. And so for the sake of time, we're going to explain some of those concepts through a couple of quick slides. Okay, so let's get into that. The concept here is HiQA is providing a single platform to exchange data between a customer or a buyer and a supplier. Okay. So a customer, somebody like Global Engineering here, might be a manufacturer of their own parts, and they may procure their own parts, or maybe they're just a purchaser and they do some assembly, something of that nature. Okay, and then we'll have the supplier over here, who is a contract manufacturer that supplies parts to Global Engineering. Okay, and so if we kind of look at the process today, what typically would happen with the manufacturing side for Global Engineering, they would have these various phases that they walk through. So there's product and design data that is put together. So you're starting with a drawing, you're building some core manufacturing quality requirements, and then we're expanding those quality requirements to account for the various steps in the manufacturing process. Okay, so like breaking things out by operations, building detailed sampling plans, and so on. Okay, and then when we talk about internal production, okay, we'll talk about internal production that would go on, and all of the data collection tools that our customers would use to collect inspection data and traceability data for all of their samples across the shop floor environment in their own facility. Okay, so these are tools that we have, and you'll see what some of those look like over the course of the presentation today. But these are tools that our customers have been using for years now at this point. As Sam mentioned, large enterprise all the way down to mom and pop shops. Okay, and so what we're doing now, this extension, is taking the experience that we've provided for manufacturers in their internal facilities and extending that experience down to suppliers in a seamless fashion to make suppliers a seamless extension of a buyer's manufacturing shop floor. Okay. And so that process happens through what we call a TDP submission, a technical data package. Okay, so if you're outsourcing parts to a supplier, then you would still have your drawing, your design data that is submitted down to your supplier. Okay, so the supplier is able to view through this experience, the supplier is able to view that data through a seamless interface with all of the quality and technical requirements of that part in the drawing. So it's not just sending a drawing via email and saying, here's a PO, here's a drawing. You might have an external contract or something of that nature, but you can embed all of the requirements for quality inspection with the drawing all together and send that down to the supplier through one system. And then the supplier, as we'll see in the presentation here, has all the same tools to manage their quality inspection that the buyer has. Okay, and they're working in the same platform, the same ecosystem. So when Sam talks about mitigating misinterpretation, there is no way to misinterpret the data requirements when you're working on the same ecosystem. Okay. And so then once the supplier does all of his quality data collection, all of the inspections, so first articles, production data, per AQL requirements, all of that stuff, it's then able to be submitted back to the buyer seamlessly through one single exchange interface. Okay. So let's jump over to a live demo, just see what this practically looks like. So we're going to start here with the buyer experience. Okay, so you can see the buyer up here. This is me, Chris Mendocino. I'm going to play the buyer, and then we'll switch to another instance. I have a whole separate machine that is running a totally separate inspection manager instance, but they are connected through our supply chain portal. Okay, so you'll see that the supplier experience is a slightly different color for the UI, so that way it'll help us distinguish where we are in the system. Okay, so from the buyer experience, we would start with a brand new drawing. So I'm going to bring that into the system, just like so, as you can see here. All right, now for those of you familiar with HiQA, these are standard tools that our customers have been using for years now. And so I just wanted to show this from the beginning as a walkthrough for those of you who have not necessarily seen Inspection Manager before and what this looks like. Something important here that we'll, well, I'll talk about that in just a second. So we're starting with a drawing, and we have the ability to manage like the part numbers in Brev and kind of the definition of this, who the customer is, and so on. But we're going to take this drawing and we're just going to auto balloon it like so. So this is just a standard PDF, and we have a lot of options here, but for the sake of time, we're just going to run this the way that it is. Now, something important to note here, the HiQA 360 platform will account for a couple different scenarios. It'll account for if the buyer wants to do the ballooning and define all of the technical details up front and send it down to the supplier. That's the ideal case, and that's what we're going to be showing today. But we also understand that there's some organizations that would prefer to just send a drawing down to the supplier and allow the supplier to do their own ballooning and build out the technical requirements and such based on whatever details were shared within the PO. Okay, so the system can work either way, but the reason why we're showing it this way here is because we feel that this is an improvement beyond what companies have traditionally been doing, because it's fine to kind of just pass a drawing down to one supplier who's going to build that part. But what happens when you have multiple suppliers that are making the same part for you, and they're all doing their own ballooning, they have their own reporting and such that they generate, and there's no way to do clean comparisons of that data between the suppliers and evaluate them easily. And so by using one system to manage all of your suppliers and defining the quality requirements and the technical details up front on the buyer side, you're able to then pass down a single set of information that is uniform across the different suppliers. Okay, so that's a new experience for some, but it's something that we want to demonstrate here this way. So you can see what happened here. Our very advanced OCR engine is able to analyze drawings and very rapidly collect all of the information from the drawing. So you can see what happened down here in what we call the bill of characteristics. Okay, so we grabbed the type, so flatness, diameter, thread, shoe position, the requirements, the nominal, upper and lower. And so this type of automation is actually one of the key differentiators that we have in why we're able to make this proposition here to say buyers can define all of the quality requirements up front because it's so much faster to do than you were doing it by hand before. Okay, we can apply gauge categories automatically based on dimension types. That's what I have set up here, that most things are checked by a CMM, but some things like threads are checked by a thread plug gauge, for example. We can define critical features. So let's say I wanted all diameters to be critical, something like this. I can just do a bulk update and grab all, assign critical to all diameters, just as an example. But the point is the buyer can define the important characteristics that need to be checked at different sampling rules and so on. We're not going to get too deep into that today, but just kind of highlighting some of the tools that are available here. Okay. One last thing, we're going to show the material down here. So we have material called out on the print. Okay, so I'm going to capture that material as well because I need to specify the material requirements to my buyer or to my supplier. Okay, so when I select that, I can populate this as needed. Right now, this entire experience ends up going down to my supplier so that my supplier can then provide things like a cert number, who they purchased the material from, they can upload their material certs and so on. And then when they return the information to me, all that information gets populated on the buyer side. Okay. So everybody's used to using the same tools and is able to share data quite seamlessly. Now, there is a layer in here that deals with internal order numbers so that you can track things that way. We're not going to get to that depth just now. What I'd want to do is, for the sake of time, kind of move through to where we need to be. So from that point, we're going to jump over to purchase orders. Okay, so the purchase order is the natural vehicle to transmit the data back and forth between buyer and supplier. It is the in most cases, it is the single record that is consistent between the buyer and the supplier. Okay, so each buyer and supplier, they'll have their own job numbers, their own lot numbers and such for their internal management, but the PO is kind of the linking item between those. So that's why we started with POs here. And this can be seamlessly integrated with ERP systems so that you're not redundantly entering data. You create a PO in your ERP, it'll show up here in this system so that you can, so that everything's a seamless exchange. Okay, so here we're going to create a PO though. Let's say you don't have an ERP or you're not connected to an ERP. We're going to say new PO. We're just going to make a number here. We'll copy the part number that we have. And we're going to pick the supplier. This is the supplier that's set up on the other instance. We'll have a due date. Again, this could be filled out by your ERP automatically. And we'll have a workflow associated with that. And we'll have personnel who are responsible for approving and reviewing and submitting the PO down to the supplier. So there's responsible parties inside of the organization. And we'll attach a particular part record here. So this is the part that we just built out and specified. So we're going to attach that to the PO and apply a quantity for it. So we'll say we want 60 of these pieces, okay, for example. Again, all this can be completed through the ERP. It may already be done, and so it can be synchronized to the HiQA system. Okay, So we have that PO now, and you'll see something that we're doing kind of beyond just a traditional PO record. We have workflows that are dynamic and automated between the systems. So you saw when we were creating the PO, we had users that were assigned for different roles within the workflow of managing it. So we start off with the draft, it goes to an engineering review, procurement, and then submitted to the supplier. And so these workflows are able to be configured to your business practices and how you want to operate and what you do for managing between your internal teams. But you can, this is the important part here. This is the linkage between you and your suppliers, is that I can manage a workflow internally, but then this step down here, once it gets to procurement review, they're able to submit it to the supplier. So they can actually assign, we can through the system assign workflow steps to people outside of my organization as well if they're connected to us through the supplier exchange, the HiQA 360 portal. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through that real quick. Because my user is assigned to all of these roles here, I see the next workflow step, I can approve it here, and you can see it's bouncing between the workflow steps. Okay, and then ultimately I will submit it to the supplier. Now, something just as a quick note, you'll see now it's at the supplier review stage and I don't have any options left because it's actually in their hands now. So something as a quick note that I'll just point out is we do have all sorts of tools for managing revisions and engineering change orders and things of that nature within the technical data package. And so, but for the sake of time, we're simplifying the storyline here. Okay. So that now shows up on the supplier side, okay? And right now though, we're going to bounce real quickly over to Hans for a quick intermission, kind of a summary of where we are, and Hans is gonna highlight where we're going next with these tool sets. So Hans, back to you.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for your part of this presentation. I will share my screen with you. Let's see. Okay, share it like this, so you can see where we are at. And remember to post your questions in the Q&A. We already saw some questions coming in from various persons, so that's very good to see. We also see a lot of contendants all over the world. That's also very nice. So let's summarize what Chris has shown you up until now on the buyer side of this presentation. And for some reason, my slide is not moving. Let me just quickly go over that. I had some slides prepared to guide you over the process that Chris did, but I'll try to do it without those slides. I hope it's okay for you to understand. We saw Chris show you the buyer side, and he has just auto-ballooned a 2D print and built a list of characteristics that need to be inspected for this part. And remember that this can also be done from a 3D model with PMI. In fact, we showed that in a previous webinar that we did with ASML. And it shows you that those things can be done from a 3D model from any CAD system. He also assigns criticality and measurement methods to the characteristics, indicating all of the requirements that he has for what to inspect on this part, and generally how he expects his supplier to do it. And that's, of course, very important because it can be done either by the buyer or by the supplier. And using the process quality planning module and the workflow in that module, the buyer created a PO, which could have been initiated in the ERP system and synchronized to Inspection Manager, of course. And that's also a very important point to mention, that inspection manager and the HiQA 360 can, of course, be integrated in other systems using our open API. That PO that we saw was then submitted to the supplier using the supply chain platform called HiQA 360 and transferred as a complete TDP, a technical data package containing the balloon drawing and all the requirements that were defined by the buyer. Okay, if Chris is ready, he will then show you the supplier side of this presentation and also do a short demonstration of that supplier side so we can really distinguish what can be done on the buyer side and what can be done on the supplier side. So Chris, I'll stop sharing my screen and back to you for the second part of your presentation.
Great, thank you, Hans. All right, let's share the screen again. I believe we're good on that. All right, so I'm on the second system that we talked about. You'll see that the color is slightly different just to kind of indicate that a little clearly. And also I'm operating as Hans Dirks now, so I'm impersonating. And so this would be the supplier experience. Now, Hans here is set up as the key point of contact for the supplier exchange. And so part of the workflows that we talked about within the PO, there's user assignment, and that means that there's also personal task lists. Okay, so as Hans, I would have gotten an email notification or even an alert in the system here. It would have shown me that I have certain activities or records that require my attention. Okay, so these were I had some other POs in the system here, just kind of staged so you can see it in a list format here. These are incoming, but this is my personal task list as Hans here. And so there might be other people in the system that have other users that have other work queued up to them. There might be documents that need to be reviewed, things like FAI reports or PPAP reports. We can even deal with things like FMEAs and control plans and more advanced documents like that. But I can see this here and I'll say, oh, this is that new PO that was just submitted through the supply chain HiQA 360 from my customer. So I'll click on that because I want to go and review that particular record. Okay, and we'll see why. There we go. All right, so I'm now able to see this particular PO. Again, remember we are on the supplier side, and I'm able to see that same sort of workflow, except now I'm seeing it from my perspective. There's a corresponding supplier workflow that correlates to all of the buyer workflows, okay, for that exchange. And I can see that I have an option to accept the order, but first we're going to go over here and I'm going to see what the line items were within that PO. Okay, so I can see that there's 60 pieces that they're asking for of this particular part number. Now, this is where it goes beyond just an ERP exchanging what Sam was referring to as metadata, right? This is where the PO stops typically within an ERP system. But here, because we're dealing with the core data of all of the technical requirements, I can open up that part and actually review it in my system because it was the entire part record was shared through the HiQA 360 experience. So I'm able to see everything that my buyer set up or my customer set up for me. I can review the exact same balloon drawing, okay? I can see the exact same bill of characteristics, which features they annotated as critical, okay? And if there were sampling rules that we had set up, I mentioned that I was bypassing that, but those sampling requirements would also show here. So just to give you an idea, we can get fairly detailed with our sampling logic, whether it's based on an AQL table, percentage of the lot size, 1 per X quantity, X per lot. Different rules can be applied for different sampling requirements per each feature, okay? So as the supplier, I say, okay, all of this looks good. By the way, I'm able to see my materials and such that are required here as well. And so we'll do that. And so I can go back to my purchase order here, and I can say, great, that's a good purchase order. I'm going to accept it. And now it shows up on the customer side as an approved PO that we're going to start working on. Okay, so the next step is, again, going beyond just a standard exchange platform. The buyer and supplier now have all the tools necessary to really carry out their inspection in detail. So there's a lot of manufacturing details I would want to specify here, right? I may want to break this up into specific operations in which to inspect the part, right? So I can click a few features here and say my first operation, I'm going to check these features. On another operation, maybe I'll check these features here. And I can break up this final inspection plan, so to speak, or a finished drawing into multiple operations. So I can define these here. Maybe this is my rough stock prep operation, right? I can define it as a specific process and so on. Okay. Oh. I don't have processes defined, so we'll skip that part. But and then what's happening here with the operations, again, speaking to the tools that the suppliers have available to them. When I create those ops, I'm creating a unique ballooned print for that operation, a unique set of inspection requirements that are completely isolated from the rest of the operations. So that means I'm able to specify precise gauge categories for that operation, because in-process inspection might use manual gauging equipment, and final inspection might use a CMM to inspect and QC. Okay, so I can specify the differences for each operation. I can specify manufacturing critical features. Maybe my customer didn't care about these, but I might as a user. So I might have certain items that I mark as critical, and they can be unique designators as well. But for the sake of time, we're just going to mark them as critical here. Okay. So we may have all of those tools. Now, this kind of leads into the data collection side of things, that once I've fully prepped this part, I'm able to then receive results data into the system. So I have a file that I prepped as like a CMM results file. So this here. So we'll pretend that these are some CMM results that came from a first article inspection. Okay. So I inspected a part on a CMM, and I want to read the results right into my HiQA system. And you can see what we have here. So we end up color coding all of the results: green if they are passing, red if they are failed, and there's pink actually here if there's a difference between the CMM program and what you had in HiQA. Okay. And so we're able to see all of that, and we can interact with that here. We can see if there's some sort of issue going on. So I just intentionally kind of threw some of these off just to be able to see those color-coded differences, that it's not just blindly accepting all of the results. Okay. All right, so we're able to ingest all that data, first for the FAI, but also for all of our production as well. Okay, so there's a little bit to get through here. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. I actually had another part that I had prepped that is a little bit further down the process here. Okay, so we'll jump over to that one instead of clicking through each detail. And so let's say that we brought those results, that results data in. What I did, this is all of our document management over here. Okay. Here, wrong part. We're going to jump over to the other one. I picked the wrong prepared part here. It is this one here. There we go. All right, so I did some doc management setup where I actually ran an AS9102 FAI report against that data. Okay, and so we can see that in here, and I uploaded a materials cert. So something that's important to point out here is that buyers and suppliers are not just agreeing on a ballooned print and inspection requirements, they're also agreeing on the types of reports that are going to be produced and supplied by the supplier along with the parts. So in this situation, the buyer said, I need an FAI report for the first piece. with the material cert. And then when you're done with production, after I approve all this, then I need a lot inspection report that shows me all of the results data for all of the pieces that you end up inspecting. Okay, so these reports then are able to be broken down into a package and submitted to the supplier or back to the customer. Okay, all right, so I just want to show you a couple of slides that represents that exchange briefly here. So again, for the sake of time, we want to go through that. So first, if we're talking about reporting, we need to understand the full weight of the data collection capabilities here. So we can collect data from basically any source that you would generate the results data from on your shop floor. So whether it's manual inspections with analog gauging equipment, we have shop floor data collection apps that serve up the balloon drawings and the inspection requirements for each operation. It's contextualized heavily based on user accounts that log in and permissions and such, and also the process stages within the manufacturing life cycle of the part. Okay, we can also automatically collect data from CMM systems, vision systems, even lasers, basically any automated inspection equipment that will output some results data. Okay, we can attach to Bluetooth or digital handheld gauges as well. Okay, so any of these tools we can interface with. There's almost nothing no automated inspection equipment on the planet that we couldn't connect to. Okay, now that feeds certain data collection interfaces on the shop floor so that shop floor personnel are able to monitor their production processes using SBC charts like this. These are configurable, customizable, but they show a high-level overview of the trends and whether we are in or outside of our SBC requirements. You can see some are highlighted red or yellow here. Okay, and the users on the shop floor can actually input results against specific dimensions as they're carrying out their production to kind of further things along. Data that's collected from the CMMs is also aggregated against the same data set. So if I'm a user on the shop floor and I'm going through and doing some manual inspection, the CMM inspections are going to show up in my displays here as well. Okay, because it's all one centralized database that's storing and aggregating all of the diverse information. So that way, when we roll up to the reporting level that I talked about just now, this kind of shows you what a package looks like. There's a couple of steps here. You would, in this simplified workflow that we have, you would have an FAI submission that contains the FAI report and the material cert that's submitted to the customer and approved so that the supplier can run production. Okay, all of this, there's no email in this process, right? This is all through the HiQA 360 exchange environment. This is an example of the FAI report. This is a Form 1. That is a Form 3, right? With all of my results data here, just a standard AS9102. And this is showing the second process here, where after my customer approves the FAI, I run my production, I collect all my results, and then I have a final submission package that I'll create. And that contains, again, the FAI report, the material cert, but now also the lot inspection report with all of the production data. Okay. And that, again, is submitted to my customer, back to them, and able to be approved. We can even send not just the reports, but we can even send all of the raw data that came directly from the CMM and was inspected with a significantly higher degree of traceability and such, showing who inspected the parts, what gauges were used, certification requirements for all of those gauges. All of that information can be shared through the HiQA 360 portal to whatever degree the buyer and the supplier agree upon within their business arrangement that they have. Okay, so that kind of takes us through the whole exchange. Again, this is a simplified workflow. The specific workflows, requirements, even the types of reports, everything in the system is able to be configured and customized per each individual customer and their suppliers that they have. Okay, so just because we had one specific use case that we were showing, don't think that the system's merely restricted to this use case. There's a lot of flexibility and variability that can be applied in here. So thank you. And Hans, back to you.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that the viewers got a clear view on the solution provided to solve the pains for buyers and suppliers in the manufacturing supply chain in a solution that is provided by HiQA. Okay, I'm back in front of my big screen, as you can see, and we are going to go over to the last part of today's webinar. We are perfectly on time. We have like 9 minutes to answer some questions, and we saw some questions coming in while Chris and Sam were presenting. So I think that means that everybody was paying very good attention. And let's start with a first question that was posted by Jim. Does the HiQA application integrate with ERP? And he is giving an example, JD Edwards or Oracle, or is it only a standalone application? I think, Chris, you already mentioned that, but can you highlight on that, please?
Yep, I think I already made that fairly clear, but yes, so HiQA has an extremely robust API. We've done integrations with large enterprise ERP systems and mid-tier ERP systems. That is not a problem whatsoever, as well as not just ERPs, but other external systems that you may want to interface with. It's an open API that's very broad. So
we're familiar, if I can add a little bit here. Can you hear me, Hans and Tim? Just to add on, yeah, we're familiar with Oracle. We have a large customers that is under Oracle, which is BAE. And as we speak, we are doing integration with SAP in a very large medical company in Europe.
Yeah, so we have experience with integrating not only in ERP, but also other systems. Thank you for that good question. Next one is, let me go over some questions. Can you share how this process glow might look for an engineered to order process where some manufacturing may occur as some assemblies are manufacturing ready? I think that's about the workflow and the process flow, Chris.
Yeah, I think what they're getting at here, and I could be wrong, but we're happy to answer any questions after the session as well. You can reach out to anybody here. But if I'm interpreting this right, I think what we're saying is there are different scenarios for how a buyer and supplier interface. Sometimes a buyer will outsource the entire part and bring it in, do receiving inspection and apply it to an assembly. That scenario is handled quite well. There's other scenarios where maybe I manufacture a part, but then there's some special processes, like I send it out for plating, or I send it out for heat treat, or some sort of special like anodizing or painting or something like that. So that would be just submitting a specific set of operation-based inspection requirements to the supplier. That scenario can also be handled quite well. So.
Okay, then one in detail question, can PO line number be added to the configuration?
Again, I think what they're getting at there is, can we have multiple line items within the PO? So you submit a PO that contains multiple parts. Yes, absolutely. Again, I simplified it, just showing one line item in this PO.
Okay, thank you for your clear answers, Chris. Next one is a good one, and good to, I think, emphasize. It appears that this is a client-based application. Do you have a web-based product for at least the supplier side?
Yes, so we're offering the HiQA 360 experience in 2 flavors. There is install to install if both parties have a fully purchased system. But if it's only the customer or the buyer that has a purchased system that's installed on premise, they can provide the full inspection manager experience, all of the tools, the whole system in a cloud-based environment. So it's much more lightweight for the supplier. They don't have to jump through the IT hurdles of getting all the databases and stuff set up. It can just be one simplified cloud experience with the same degree of tool sets and robustness. It's a fully functional inspection manager in the cloud. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question is more on the CAD side. We will answer that question online. And the other one is, does the supplier operations and PO feed into their system?
I think what's being asked here, again, I'm trying to read between the lines a little bit. I think what's being asked is, can the operation data, so like the manufacturing data that we applied at the supplier level, we broke it out into manufacturing ops and said which dimensions are checked where. Yes, to whatever degree that you want to share data with your customer, you can set that up within the PO requirements and share that level of data. If you just want it to be files and reports, you can do that. If you want it to be the actual part and op level data, that's also able to be shared because it's one seamless platform.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Chris. Then a question, we use a mix of GD&T and traditional non-GD&T dimensioning and tolerancing. Does auto-ballooning work with traditional dimensioning and tolerancing? I think I can answer this question. Yes, we can. We can, in fact, handle all dimensions that are on a drawing, being it a 2D or in a 3D model. And you can enrich that information with the information that you as a quality engineer think belongs to that dimension. So the answer is definitely yes. And the automatic character recognition, the optical character recognition will also work on normal dimensioning.
Just to add to that too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pulling from, it's pulling
Heading.
from, you can set up tolerance tables
Exactly.
within the system. So either decimal tables, range tables, fit tolerance tables, things like that. You can define in Inspection Manager, and then that'll get applied when you do the auto ballooning. It'll apply the general tolerancing automatically. So
On non-GD&T data. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, good addition to that answer. Thank you very much, guys. Another question, need PDF to balloon one file, or is it possible to have several files that you can combine to one part? It's possible to have one PDF of more than one drawing, but we can also add PDFs to the part, and they will be viewed as sheets in that part. So a definite yes to that, and that can also be a bill of materials, so we can also work on assemblies and single piece parts. Anything to add to that, guys?
There is no limit on how many PDF pages you have on a file. You can do one, you can do multiply, you can select them, and you can add data sheet to this file. And that's kind of concluding what...
Okay, thank you.
To put it in perspective and quantify it, we have some customers that have drawing files that are 500 pages long with 10,000 dimensions on them. So there's no worries about that.
Yeah, great.
Indeed.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and that's from Mattia. Is the software available only on premises, or is there also a web-based version? I think it's like a duplicate for one of the
yeah, I think we addressed that already.
We had before, but very good to emphasize on this, I think.
If we can do one more, that one from Turker, Hans.
Ah,
yeah, it's okay. We can take 1 minute, from the time. So let's go.
So, so it's a definite yes that it was also web-based. Chris, I guess, answered that before. What kind of server security do you provide during the connection of suppliers? So more on the security side of things.
Yep. So the security side, if I can just answer it simply, should not be a concern to anybody, no matter what type or what level of security requirements you have. We are handling some of the most robust and comprehensive security requirements on the planet with some of the starting with some of the US import-export controls that we have here and using specialized AWS cloud infrastructure that handles government level security requirements. And we're even accounting for international import-export regulations and compliance standards. And so, and we're using specialized certificate authentication for end-to-end encryption for the exchange of data between the buyer and the supplier. So I know that's a little bit, that's a mouthful, but yeah, that's not a concern no matter what type of manufacturing you're doing. The system is very robust.
Okay, so we are on the hour, even 1 minute over the hour. So I think we have to conclude our webinar here. And I will hand over the mic to Mindel to really close this webinar for today. Thank you guys for your presentation.
Thank you.
So thank you, Hans. I would like to thank Hans Derks. I would like to thank Chris Medincino, Sam Golan, and of course, Jack Leonard. You have not seen Jack, but he was behind the screens helping us today to make this webinar really successful. And then I would like to say one more thing. The next MBD event, if you're a member of the MBD community, the next event is the 18th of December, and we have another meet and match planned. So if you're a member of the community, join. And if you're not a member of the community, you can still subscribe to become a member. So that was it. And I would thank you all for joining the webinar and hope to see you the next time.
Great. Thank you, everyone.